Welcome, everybody, back to our podcast today. I am so thrilled again to have my potential partner, Andrea Carpenter, on with me. Our journey is continuing to unfold and blossom, and just it's so exciting. So, Andrea, thanks for being here again. I appreciate you so much.
Yeah, always glad to be here.
That's good. So today, Andrea and I have been working on this workshop it's just a online kind of workshop that we're doing, and it's called Metamorphosis. And we put together some key things that a transitioner goes through to morph from being the owner, founder, leader to being what they're going to be beyond and what that looks like. So there's a metamorphosis that takes place there. And there's also a metamorphosis that takes place from being a successor to coming into that then owner, right, leader role that happens. So we thought today what we would do is just walk you through two of the components of that metamorphosis. First one is going to be character. So what character are you playing in these different roles? And then the second one we're going to talk about is the role. So we'll start with the business owner and under the character segment. The business owner, leader, founder at times, we think of them as a magician. So if you can think of a magician on stage, doing the tricks, making it all happen, and it's just illusionary how they're able to do this. It's magical. So we call them the magician. And that's really this entrepreneur that's on their journey. And what they're able to do is they're able to really jump on stage anytime and magically take what would be a challenge and turn it into momentum going forward. So what other people see as, gosh, a roadblock or something like that, a big challenge, these owners are able to just turn it into movement forward, keep people moving forward. They discover the challenges and then they engage in making things happen. And this is super rewarding for them. It's super rewarding, and it's a part of their DNA, part of what creates the fulfillment for them. I don't know, Andrea, if you want to add to that.
Yeah, I think just to be that person, to like, you're the star kind of when you own the business and you're running it, you're leading it, the team looks up to you. That's just kind of the reality of where you are when you're the leader in the business. And so now we'll kind of talk about it like as the successor thinks about moving into that, and as you as an owner think about transitioning out of that, what does that kind of look like? Which I think is it's kind of an interesting shift because you don't get to be in the spotlight forever. Part of the reality of exiting a business is that eventually that goes away, which can be a really hard transition. And that takes us back to the metamorphosis theme, right? You're kind of coming out on the other side, something different.
Yeah, absolutely. So pretend you're the magician. And so we all, if you're an owner, you've been in that role and maybe for quite some time. The next stage, the metamorphosis to what we're calling beyond, because beyond says that because you're going to go through so many different whens, right? So many different transitions as an owner. You may choose to go through some role transition inside of the business. So maybe CEO to chairman of the board or something like that. So you're letting go of some of the day-to-day activities, taking on some of the more futuristic, strategic activities. So that could be part of your beyond. The other thing that you might be doing is pondering or even be in the middle of a transaction, which could be gifting to a family member, or it could even be, selling. But you're you're working towards transacting and reducing your level of ownership. So getting out of that investment side also. And so we call that beyond, because we want you to be able to, whatever your beyond is what it's going to look like, and whatever's going to keep you happy. So in beyond, what happens in your character is you're guiding the successor. So your successor has started coming into the owner leader role, and your real character that you're going to play is your guiding. You're just a guide. So you're guiding them on their journey. You're asking powerful questions. You're helping them to discover what they don't know. You're helping them to see challenges that you would see instantly, but they don't. And you really want them to move forward and gain their own forward momentum so that they can live this wonderful, rewarding life that you've been doing for so long, and they're able to take it on without you. It's an exciting time. And like Andrea said, it can be a bittersweet time. So, and one last thing, as you grow older, and you get all of this wisdom and knowledge, there's what they call there's like this functional knowledge that you have when you first start the business, and you're functionally making it work and go. And then what happens is it turns into what they call crystallized knowledge. And crystallized knowledge is the knowledge that you're using in the beyond stage, and your successor is developing and using their functional knowledge. So those two things married together create what is now the next magic for this business.
I don't know, because where we're at in our journey, you're still firmly business owner leader role. But as we start to talk about me coming in and you ponder this beyond any, like in more depth, like, how is it sitting? How is it feeling? Are there tension points? Are there things that are feeling exciting? Just like, what's sort of your reaction when you think of yourself as the character?
Was me as the character. Yeah, I've been, it's interesting because there's a lot of self development, I think, that has to take place. And really noticing and being open, first of all, to new things. I will tell you that because of you, Andrea, I have learned more new technology than in the last 6 months than I had learned in a long time. So as long as I was open to new things, then it's fun. If I'm not open to new things, it's kind of like, oh my goodness, not so sure about that. And so I've been enjoying it, but there are times when I catch myself kind of going, ooh, that would be something I like, or I want to do, or ooh, that's not quite the way I would do it. And when I do that, luckily, I think I'm getting better at catching myself. In the beginning, I probably wasn't. You can tell me if it was hard, but I've found I'm getting better at catching myself, and I think I'm getting better at being open to just seeing what's possible.
Yeah. And I'm happy to share my perspective too, once we talk about the successors transition. So should we give a brief overview of that before we jump?
Yeah, definitely.
So let's talk about the successors transition then into kind of the leader. And we call this kind of the apprentice. So you think of the successor as the apprentice to the magician. They want to be the entrepreneurial magician, but also they recognize that they're their own unique person. And I think this is a really fascinating thing about the apprentice, because you would apprentice a magician, and you would be talking with them and you would be learning their tricks, but also you have your own flair. You have your own kind of way, your own vision, your own passion. And so you start to see how you can fit in to the larger picture, but you're still not the one. So there can be feelings of anxiousness. You're feeling ready to go. You have like kind of this excitement, but also you recognize your place, that you're still learning. And there's kind of this big learning curve on the transition to becoming a leader. anything to add on that transition metamorphosis from successor to leader?
Well, it's interesting because I think the successor they walk a couple of really interesting lines. One is being the apprentice. You can imagine the learning curve is sometimes ridiculous. You're expected to do so much in such a little amount of time. And while you're expected to do a lot and step in and really engage, you're also walking a very, very fine line of overstepping your bounds, right? Because you're hoping that you know what you know, and you also don't know what you don't know. And it is tough. It is just a tough role, that apprentice role.
Yeah. And I was gonna, that has pretty much been my experience. It's this fine line. You mentioned the technology thing, so that I have some conviction in. Oh, this is something that has worked well for me in the past. Like I could see how it could fit here, but also what's the historical knowledge or the reason or the decision behind why it was implemented in this way in the first place. And sometimes you have to catch yourself. You have to stop. You have to pause. You have to ask good questions. All of these are part of growing as a leader, growing as a successor, to really try to understand the landscape. And the longer you do it, the more confident you feel in your brain. Maybe in reality, that's not the truth, or that's not the way things are actually going. And at least, or maybe your business owner, or your current leader doesn't feel that way. And so keeping, I think, as much of an open dialogue as possible about where things are working, where things aren't, where there's opportunities to focus, and kind of who is owning what and who is doing each type of thing is super, super critical, which I guess will kind of segue us into a little bit of talking about the roles that we play within the business for each of these things. But for me, in my experience, like if we don't have that clear communication and I'm not 100% sure what I'm supposed to be working on, also asking questions like, do you want me to take ownership of this? Is this my decision? Is this something I'm going to run by you and we're going to sign off on together? That can be really, really helpful too, navigating, beginning to think about what it looks like to officially step up into that leadership role.
Yeah. Well said. Yeah. And as I think hopefully you're seeing in our podcast and our conversation, how important it is to have conversation and communication. And I just literally got off of a meeting with a client that she's been a client of mine for probably 8 or 9 years now. And we were just talking about this fun model about starting with curiosity, then having the conversation and making a conclusion. And it's so easy when we're busy, right? The successor's learning at a high level, trying to keep all the balls in the air. The business owner is trying to move into the beyond stage of being the guide and learning new things and new things in the business and also new behaviors. And it's so easy to not communicate, because not only there's more on your plate when you're going through this process than less, because a business still requires both people in it. And then on top of it, you just layer this right on top. And it's like, oh yeah, we got this. And then it's, so who are you? I haven't talked to you in a month. But the communication needs to go up, and also the openness needs to go up. There really aren't any secrets of goods, bads, uglies. All of it is available, and I think it is what makes it successful.
Yeah. And you mentioned earlier the many whens, and I'll spell that for people who are just listening, WHENS. It sounds like wins. Sometimes they are wins. You're like a WINS. You're like, yes, that was a win that we got through that. But the many whens, WHENS, that is really to have them documented and to know when certain transitions are happening is so helpful as a successor. Like, okay, around October, this is probably going to happen. Around January, I anticipate this is going to happen. Elizabeth's going to take this role. Andrea's going to take this role. Things can always change. That's the point. That's why the communication is so important. But to have things mapped out on a high level, just wanted to share that with those who are kind of the current leaders. It it has been really transformational for me to be able to know when these things are hitting, so I can prepare and be a better partner as we begin to navigate. So if you're a successor listening, that could be something that you could start to ask for or try to plot out if that's a tool that would help you. Again, it's about that communication. So create some type of framework if you need that to help facilitate the conversations, at least to start, because sometimes it is hard to just walk in an empty room and say, okay, what are we doing? What's our problem? What are we solving out? So framing it around some milestones or things that you're working towards and what expectations are for each one can be really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for bringing that up, Andrea, because that timeline, it's very, very helpful also for the person who's the transitioner. Time flies. It's amazing how quickly things go. And again, with a full plate, where do you find time for these conversations? Where do you find time for getting documents done? Where do you find time for making sure you're hitting the milestones and not just running completely past them and 2 or 3 years goes by? Then usually you end up with a successor who's pretty frustrated, and you're pretty frustrated too, which then will lead us into the role, right?
Yep.
The role is the second one. So I'll start with the owner leader. The owner leader, they're the business owner, very clearly the leader. They're the driver and the doer. So we call them the driver doer. They have daily influence in moving the business forward. And the funny thing about it is that you're moving at your own pace. As that owner in a privately held company, you are in so much control. So you move at your own pace with your own high engagement. And if you decide to take a month off, hopefully the business runs while you come back, and then you become that driver doer again, and things start to happen like, again, magic. You do what you need and what you choose. You can hire your team around you so that it works for you. And then you just operate the business with yourself and that team that you enjoy, hopefully. That's the business owner leader. When we switch to the beyond, then what happens is, instead of being the driver doer, you're becoming the watcher advisor. So you're watching and advising. A couple things that you need in your role is you have to have the ability to let go. You have to be able to watch your successor find their own feet, their own foundation, and increase their momentum. So you're watching them find where they are, and then increasing as their momentum as they gain this confidence and they gain a direction that they're confident in. So the ultimate thing is they do what they need to, and they choose what they're going to do, and they choose the team around them so that they can go build their vision of the business. And notice, it's not you doing what you need and you doing what you choose to do, and you having your team, but they're actually replacing you, and they're building the vision, hopefully without you, and while you watch and advise and become their safe harbor. And I'll just say this one thing, Andrea, and then we'll go on to the successor. But the other day I had a great client, and we were talking about his kids. We're talking about the kids, and these kids are mid 40s. So the kids are out there, and I noticed, because of the work that we're doing, that the kids are like, hey, we're not going to tell mom and dad about that, right? It's inside the business. We're not, that's just our thing. We can get through this ourselves. And so noticing that the kids aren't seeing the parents as a safe harbor. So when you become the watcher advisor, there's a shift that takes place where there's less judgment and more mentorship, where they can come with their biggest problems and their smallest, and really say, gosh, I need some help, instead of, I'll figure this out on my own because it's not going to go well if I share.
Yeah. That's an interesting segue into the owner. And I do want to come back and touch on that point of perception of an owner or parents looking at their kids and the way that they're stepping into this new role. Because I think when you think about the role and you think about the successor, most likely they have a full-time job that they're already doing inside the business in some capacity. Maybe they're on the marketing side, maybe they're on the sales side, maybe they're helping in a financial capacity. It's different in every family. It depends how many successors you potentially have. Is there only one? Are there multiple? So lots of different things here that could play into this, but successors have their own role and they're starting to think about what it looks like to become an owner, but someone else is sitting squarely in that owner's seat right now. And you see the way that they're doing it. And you begin to, at least in the back of your mind, for me, you're starting to evaluate, like, what would it look like if I was in that leadership role? What would I change? What would I do? And at the end of the day, you're trying to do your own job. You know that once the transition starts, it's going to be one of the hardest things, but potentially one of the most rewarding things that you ever get to personally do. And you're working really hard to do whatever it takes, but also it's not yours yet. You don't know the exact timeline. You know, it still belongs to someone else. And I feel like sometimes as a successor, you pump the brakes a little bit. And you're like, I just need to I have to put a boundary around this to protect myself because some of this is outside of my control. And I'm curious, Elizabeth, because you have worked with a lot of businesses. Sometimes I hear owners say, well, my kids are in the business, but they just don't have the motivation, or they just don't work as hard as I'm going to work. I don't know if they're cut out for this. And for me, sometimes in response as a successor, I want to say, well, if the path isn't clear, like, why am I going to give 180% to this thing if I don't know if it's going to work out? That's like, it's putting a lot of me on the line in this situation. I'm curious if you have any thoughts on that.
Wow, I think you said that very well, because there's a lot of emotion that goes into this. And I think I think owners are many times wanting to have their successors step up, and then if the successor does step up, sometimes they squash them because it's too much, or they don't know what they're doing, or, there's a lot of judgment that goes on. And I think that goes back to the idea of being curious, then having conversations, and then making the conclusion. That curiosity says, wow, maybe they're doing more. Instead of like, well, they're not working hard enough, they're not at the office early, they don't leave last, they're not here for everybody, blah, 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 because that is common. It could be they're available all the time via phone, and they're available basically 24/7. Anytime anybody needs them, they're there. And life has changed. There is work from home. There is virtual. There are so many different choices that people actually are able, sometimes successors are actually able to get more done because of the way they work and the way they see things. So yeah, it's we see that all the time in our work. Yeah. It's basically a miscommunication. It's not reality. It's a miscommunication between how people are working and how they're being perceived.
Mm. And so we come full circle. It's all about just how we communicate with each other, set clear expectations, share what everyone is thinking and feeling. But I think there were some really important points in there. And really the beyond for the business owner and the leader is that letting go, which means letting go of the expectations of what the successor is going to do, which can feel scary. We had a business owner last week. He's like, well, I'm going to let them do their thing, but they still have to be able to pay me back. Like, things have to continue working moving forward. And you have to, like, eventually there's a point where you have to say, I'm going to let it go. I'm going to trust that you're going to be able to do this. And then that's going to move forward. And that is a big leap of faith. And I guess that brings us back to our theme of that metamorphosis, because it really is this whole transformation of self around these concepts.
Absolutely. Well, and that makes me think about the idea of a timeline. The work is around putting people first, and that it's a journey. This is a journey. You don't wake up we hope you don't wake up one day and you're not the business owner and you're in the beyond stage and you're just like, oh, what happened, right? How did I end up here? And especially in a transition with somebody that you know or one of your children, it's so important to be able to strategize and to give yourself some time to walk through this. You'll end up being happier, more fulfilled. And by taking it as a journey, your beyond stage as an owner leader, you still can watch after the business. You still can create safety within the business. You just do it from a different role or a different character. And it helps your successor and it helps you as long as you keep the relationship healthy, which means more communication, not less.
And I guess one thing to help our successors, like what advice would you give a successor if they're thinking about this, if they're hearing this conversation, they're like, oh, okay, maybe we could build a timeline. Maybe we should open communication more. We have had successors come to us and eventually the whole business comes in and works on their transition journey planning together. What advice do you have for a successor around starting that conversation?
Well, thanks for asking that question. And I think the most important thing is relationship. I think if you walk in and I think if you hit something head on, like, hey, this isn't working for us and we're not doing well and blah, 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 right? This isn't working. I think you end up with some resistance. But I think if you walk in with, again, that concept of curiosity is it's an incredible tool that a lot of us don't use very often because we think it makes us feel or seem weak. I think that, it does. Curiosity, it does. It makes you seem sometimes a little bit weak. But the funny thing about it is it's probably one of the most powerful tools you have in your toolbox to use. And if I was a successor and I was going to walk in and ask my owner leader, I might say, you know what, this business means a lot to me. And I know it means a lot to you. And I want to be the best successor that I can be. And sometimes I feel like I'm working in a vacuum. And I think that, we're not aligned at times. And so, what would you think about just being curious and exploring, coming up with some kind of a strategy for us to walk through the next 3 to 5 years together? Mm-hmm. It's an invitation. And I think those 3 to 5 years, it posts some curiosity in the owner's mind to say, what would that be like if we did that? Because then you can do it together. And I think that's beautiful.
Yeah. So with that, I think that's a nice segue into kind of our offer. We see that this is so important. So whether you're a successor and you want to attend by yourself, or you're a business owner, you want to attend by yourself, or maybe you're an advisor who's helping clients navigate beginning conversations like this. If you feel like you need a few more tools or talking points, or you want to kind of learn about all the other angles and parts of the metamorphosis, we're offering one free workshop every month. It's 90 minutes. You can register at transitionstrategist.com/workshop. And really what we are so excited about in this is it's a peer learning opportunity. You could come together if you need a space to begin to start having conversations between yourself and your successor, or if you're the successor, you and your business leader would be happy to support you in those workshops. We went through 2 today, but there are 6 different kind of metamorphoses that we have that we can discuss in that workshop. We also talk about our transition compass, some of the essential questions. Really, that would give you the beginning of groundwork of what it looks like to collaborate and begin to work on that 3 to 5 year plan, eventually leading to more of a concrete timeline. So we would love to see anyone there that this might serve. So yeah, that's our plug.
Andrea, thank you. This is so much fun to be here and to have these conversations. And both Andrea and I think I can speak for her. We are hoping that you'll be able to take this information and make a difference for you and your successor or transitioner, and ultimately the business and the community that it serves. So thanks for being here.